Hello and welcome to your guide to passing the 2020 CPA exam. I'm Roger Philipp of Roger CPA Review powered by UWorld, and thank you so much for watching this seminar to learn more about the changes and the upcoming 2020 CPA exam. Now, a little bit about Roger CPA Review. We are here to partner with you in your CPA exam preparation. We've helped over 200,000 students accomplish their goal of what? Passing the CPA exam. We have a proven 91+% pass rate, and that rate has increased dramatically since we issued our brand new Smart Path. And the Smart Path helps students to focus in on what they need to know in order to help them pass the exam. Basically, we look at our students who have passed the exam, just passed the exam using our product. We look at what percent they got correct, how many questions they did, and so on. And by doing this, it tells you, hey, you know what? We don't need 15,000 questions. It's overkill. You've done enough in this area. Let's move on to the next area so you can do enough questions there, because our goal is to get you through the exam with a 75 and above so you too can become a CPA. Now, when we look at the CPA profession, why is it an exciting time right now to be a CPA? First of all, great job security. I mean, as the economy is strong, we always need accountants, we always need CPAs. As the economy changes, accountants are always in demand. You're a trusted advisor and a business consultant. And this is great because it gives you lots of flexibility and opportunities. If, for example, like myself, CPA, and then I started my own business, right? Become an entrepreneur, or a business consultant where you can assist others in helping them how to improve their business as well. We're always staying on the cutting edge of technological advances. As things change, the exam is updated, the industry changes, things like big data, data analytics, and so forth. You get to enjoy kind of a work-life balance. So it's a combination of enjoying what it is you do, but also always feeling challenged. I loved that with always, even today, I've got to keep my CPE, continuing professional education, up to date. In California, for example, I need 80 hours every 2 years, a minimum of 20 hours a year. There's always new things changing, which I'll talk about later, especially as it relates to the CPA exam. But that keeps it new and fresh. You're never going to get bored at work. That's for sure, because it's always changing. And then finally, ka-ching, ka-ching, great salary, great benefits as well. Now that I've shown you how exciting it can be to be a CPA, how do we get from point A to CPA? Also known as the 4 E's, because we're going to talk about the educational requirements, the exam itself, the ethics exam, and the actual practical work experience that you're going to need in order to become a CPA. And then after that, let's submit our paperwork so we can actually become a CPA. Now, as far as the E, educational requirements, in order to sit for the exam, in most states you need, or in all states, you need at least a bachelor's degree from an accredited university. In most states, you need 150 semester units as well. That's in most states. Some states are different. California, for example, you need a bachelor's degree to sit, but the 150 to get certified, and at least 24 units of intermediate accounting or above. So those are just some of the basic national educational requirements which qualifies you to sit for the exam. Now, as far as applying for the exam, you're going to apply with the Board of Accountancy, and in applying, it costs about $120 for the application fee. What you do is you submit your transcripts, and you're going to have your university send the transcripts directly to them. They're going to look at those, again, then gets approved by NASBA, National Association of State Board of Accountancies, and they will issue you a payment coupon. Once the NASBA fees are received, you'll be issued this thing called an NTS, which is called a notice to schedule. Now, as far as your notice to schedule, you will receive that, and it's generally good depending on what state you're in, because what it says is, okay, these are the parts that you're scheduled to sit for. So let's just say each part costs $220, right? It goes up every year. Let's say 220, 246, that's $880. Now, it costs you $880, so when you sign up and you get your notice to schedule, that means you need to sit for those parts within that notice to schedule period. Notice to schedule, most states are about 9 months. Some states are 6 months. Some could be 12 months. So it depends on what state you're in. California, for example, we're good for 9 months, which means that whatever part you pay for, you need to sit for within that window. If you don't sit for that part, then those fees are going to be forfeited. So I always tell people, don't sign up for all 4 parts. What I would say is pay your application fee. Let's just say it's $100, depending on your state. then you pay for each part. So let's say you sign up for 2 parts, $440. That means you're going to sit for that within that notice to schedule period, which is, let's say, 6 to 12 months. If you decide I want to add another part, then you're a reapplication, which is half that price, about $50, and then you still pay your $220 per part. If, however, you sign up for all 4, pay for all 4, and you don't sit within that 6 to 9 months, guess what? You forfeit that fee. So we don't want to do that. So I always tell people sign up for the first 2, and you can always add another. Because the first time you sign up, it could take maybe 6 weeks to get your notice to schedule. Once they have your transcripts, did a background search, all that stuff, then it takes about 3 or 4 days to get a notice to schedule for the additional parts. So it's really not too time consuming. So again, I hate to see you waste your hard-earned cashola. So what I would do, sign up for 2, you can add some more later. Also, make sure your name on your notice to schedule exactly matches your photo ID. Because when you go to sit for the exam at a testing center called Prometrics, they're going to check, you need 2 forms of ID, a credit card and something with a photo, but you've got to make sure the names exactly match. So if you did something totally crazy, like what? Fell in love and got married, and let's say you change your name, great, but you better make sure your name matches the name on the IDs as well. Now, when can I sit for the exam? Basically, we have 4 windows in a year currently. Let's say the first quarter, right, January, February, March, so you can sit January 1st through March 10th. Then they generally close the exam from the 10th until the next month, which would be April 1st. So what happens is during that time, they kind of close it down, they retool the exam, maybe update some questions, things like that. Now, as far as each window, you can sit for 1, 2, 3, or all 4 parts in that window, in that quarter. So if you wanted to sit for audit and FAR in the first window, let's say January 1st through March 10th. Generally, you'll get your results about 20 days. So you take the exam, let's say January 1st, the first 20 days, they'll take that, they'll hold that for about 10, 20 days, and then release the results. So they'll typically release the results 3 or 4 times in every single window. Let's say I sit for audit January 1st, I get the results February 1st, darn, I didn't pass. I cannot sit for that part until the next window. So the way it's set up again is we've got these 4 windows, and again, you could sit for all 4 parts 4 times a year, not that you want to, but that's the way it's set up. Then they have the blackout period. That's kind of when they're retooling the exam, updating it, and so forth. Once you pass a part, you keep that part for 18 months. So let's say I study for a part, take a part, pass that part, boom, my 18-month window starts generally from the date you sat for that exam. So I get the results, I see that I passed FAR or audit, let's say. Now I've got 18 months to study and pass the other 3 parts of the exam. So if I pass, don't pass, and 18 months goes by, I don't lose everything, because that's how it was when I was your age. Now you just lose the first part. So as long as you can pass them in that 18-month window, then they say, hey, you deserve to be considered a CPA. Now I get this question all the time. They go, Raj, which part should I sit for first? I always say it depends on what part you feel comfortable with, because no matter what part you take, there's going to be stuff you've never seen in school. It's rare that I've ever met a professor who finished the entire intermediate accounting book, for example, right? They look at the book and they go, well, I'm going to finish everything in the book. And you're like, oh my gosh, right? And then they start talking, well, that reminds me, blah, 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 blah. And they go off on a tangent and they don't cover the last parts. Also, there's electives in school. For example, when I was in college, governmental accounting was an elective, and I elected not to take it. So the only way I was exposed to it was through the review course, which gave me what I needed to pass the exam. So people always say, which part should I start with? I always say, well, if you feel, let's say you just had an amazing audit teacher in school, great, start with audit or start with FAR. But if you are indifferent as to the 4, then FAR is by far the thickest book. It has the most content. So I would say start with FAR. That way you study, then you take it and you pass. That's when your 18-month window starts. So now I have 18 months to pass the other 3. So our suggestion is FAR, then either audit or reg, because they take about a similar amount of time to prepare for. And then the last one is BEC, because it's a little bit more general, and I'll talk about what's on each exam in a minute. But it's a little bit more general, and so by the time you get to that 4th part, you really start to see the whole picture. And incidentally, that's one of the things I miss about the olden days. You know, I feel like your parents, when I was your age, back in the day when I sat for the exam, it was 3 days, twice a year. You had to sit for all 4 parts at the same time. You had to pass at least 2 parts to keep anything, and the parts you didn't pass, you had to get at least a 50% or more, or you kept nothing. So if you got a 99, 99, 99, 49, guess what? You started over. Now, you study for a part and take a part, and study for a part and take. So it doesn't make it easier, but it changes the nature and way in which people prepare for the exam. So again, the other thing that I miss is when we studied all 4 parts, you really kind of saw the overview of how it all fit together. Now you study for a part, pass it. Study for a part, pass it. By the time you get to your 3rd part, you go, oh, now I kind of see the whole picture. Because it really ties together. How FAR ties into regulation, and you've got your M1 reconciliation, which ties into the auditing area, and how the auditing changes affects the numbers and affects the audit report, and so on. So there's a whole bunch of overlap, but you'll start to see it as you continue on in the exam, and you start to get more of it done. Now, what do you expect on the exam? The exam currently is 16 hours in length. There's 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. When I took it, it was 19 and a half hours. Then they changed it to 14, then they raised it up to 16 hours. The 4 parts of the exam are FAR, Financial Accounting and Reporting, Auditing, Regulation, and BEC, Business Environment and Concepts. What's included in there? FAR is Financial Accounting and Reporting. That is Intermediate 1. Intermediate 2, Advanced, Government, Nonprofit, squeezed into a fun-filled 4-hour adventure. Leases, bonds, pensions, deferred taxes, consolidations, contingent liabilities, governmental accounting, nonprofit accounting, and so on. Auditing is planning, internal control, substantive testing, IT, audit reports, SSARS, reviews, compilations, financial statement presentations, and so on. So at the end of the audit, what do? Draft an audit report. What does it say? In our opinion, the statement is referred to above since fairly in all material respects financial position of Exco 1231, the results of its operations in conformity with U.S. GAAP or applicable financial reporting framework. So I was single for a long time, so I had time to memorize it. But basically, that's your audit report. We'll talk about the types of opinions, how it affects it, how you make adjustments, and so on. Regulation, that's going to be your tax, which is up to about 80% of that exam. Tax, business law, and ethics. Now with tax, that could be things like individual tax, your 1040. There are different schedules, A, B, C, D. Could be your 1120 corporate tax, 1120 S Corps, 1065 partnerships, 6252 installment sales, 706, 709, 1041s, estate, trust, gift, exempt organizations, 990. That is regulation. It also includes business law. Now when I took the exam many moons ago, business law was its own exam for 3.5 hours. Now the same content, a little bit, they took a little bit out, but not much, is whittled down to 10 to 20% of this one exam, which is already just a 4-hour exam. So there's a lot of material in business law we'll cover, and then of course ethics and professional responsibility. For BEC, this is going to be economics, micro, macro, financial management, operations management, IT, information technology, our favorite cost managerial, right? Variance analysis. Remember that? It's back. So what is BEC, business environment? That's going to be like your cost accounting. That's going to be like where you're trying to figure out the cost, direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead. What could go wrong with materials, with labor, with overhead, and so on? That's going to be your BEC, joint product costing, budgeting analysis, and so on. So again, those are the 4 parts. Even if there's stuff you didn't see in school, you don't remember, we will cover in class what you need to know to accomplish your goal, which is to pass the CPA exam. Because I realize how most of us went through school. We go, this semester is going to be different, I'm not going to fall behind, right? And then you get your syllabus and you get your book and you go, I'm going to study, I'm going to study, I'm going to study. You're walking home, hey Raj, toga party, okay. And it's the night before, you cram, take the exam, whoosh, blow it out your brain after the exam. This is the comprehensive final you never saw in school. So I like people to realize this is not an IQ test. You do not have to be a genius to be a CPA. However, it's a test of discipline. If you study, you will pass. That's our job, is to motivate you. So part of what we do is not only just teach you accounting, but I need to motivate you to put in the couple of 100 hours of prep time it's going to take in order to get through all 4 parts of the exam. So I'm part therapist and part CPA instructor. What kind of questions make up the exam? We've got multiple choice type questions, and that's about 50% of your score. And then we have what we call task-based simulations. These task-based simulations, those could be for like a research question. They could be a problem where you're kind of mixing and matching. And then they have a newer type of question called a document review simulation, which has much more detail. It has exhibits that we need to look through as well. On the BEC exam, that one's structured a little differently. That one has written communication. It does have some TBS, but it also has written communication or essays. Generally, it has like 3 essays, of which only 2 are graded. Same thing with the other exams. You've got 8 simulations, of which usually 1 is research, and the other 7 are problems, and of those 8, 1 is pre-tested, not graded. So as we look at these kinds of questions, you've got a multiple choice type question. Generally, you've got 4 different choices. We don't really say A, B, C, D anymore, or A, B, C, yeah, A, B, C, I had to count 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't really say that, but you've got 4 different choices to choose from. You also have a countdown clock, and that's important as you're taking the exam, because in life, we don't really count down. You know, I've got 20,000 days of life, 19,999, 98, 90. But at the exam, you log on, it goes, you got 4 hours, 359, 358, and your heart starts racing like, oh my gosh, I should have started studying sooner, right? So part of that is us preparing you and giving you sample exams so you can get used to that exam pressure as well. But you've got multiple choice type questions, and as I said, 50% of your score comes out of these multiple choice, and we'll talk later, but you could have anywhere from 31 times 2 or 62 multiple choice up to 38 times 2, because you'll have 5 different testlets, which I'll talk about in a minute. You've got a task-based simulation where you might click on the choice and it pops up a window and it gives you a variety of choices in order to pick the correct solution. You've got this newer type called a document review simulation called a DRS. This is a type of task-based simulation called TBS, but it's much more involved. This came about when they said, you know what, they went out and talked to the accounting profession, they talked to the professors, they talked to the real world people and said, what are first and second year CPAs lacking? They said they're lacking critical thinking and the ability to analyze information. So what they said is, okay, let's try to come up with a more real-world type of problem called a document review simulation. And what happens here is they give you a scenario, they give you a variety of questions, and then they give you a tab with called exhibits. And these exhibits could be depreciation schedules, balance sheets, income statements, letters from attorneys, invoices, different things that you've got to look at. And what they want you to do is look through this support, these exhibits, and discern which items are useful in solving the problem, and which ones are just to kind of throw you off. It's kind of like if someone came to you and asked you to do their taxes, and they said, hey, here's a shoebox full of receipts, have a lovely day. So you're going to look through there and say, well, this is deductible, this one isn't, the cost of cleaning my suit, no, right? Not a business expense. So you're going to look through that and see which ones are or aren't. That's the kind of question, that's more of a DRS. These questions take a little bit more time, maybe 20 to 25 minutes as far as how much time to prepare. Research is on audit, FAR, and reg. So think of the 4 parts, we'll break these 3 in 1. This is audit, FAR, and reg, this is BEC. Because audit, FAR, and reg are structured similarly, whereas BEC is completely different. With audit, FAR, and reg, they're going to have at least 1 research question on each exam. The research question, most of our students don't have a lot of trouble with. You know, we all do Google searches every day, for example. So this part usually isn't a problem for our students. Figure you need about 10 minutes for the research type question, and that's going to be, again, an audit, FAR, and reg. Written communication, that's only here on BEC, because BEC has multiple choice, task-based simulations, 4 of them, and generally 3 written communications or essays. So on BEC, you've got an essay. They want to know, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Is it clear, concise, complete, use of standard English, appropriateness for the reader? That's what they're looking for, spelling, grammar, punctuation, and so on. So they're looking at that to see that you can take what they're asking and set up a coherent, smooth essay. As I said earlier, what does the exam look like? Audit, FAR, and reg has 50% multiple choice, 50% task-based simulations. The 50% multiple choice, that's going to be 2 testlets, 2 sections of multiple choice, and then the task-based simulations, there's 8 of them. You're going to have 2 of them, then a break, and then 3 and 3. For BEC, 50% multiple choice, 35% task-based simulations, and 15% written communication. So you'll have multiple choice, 31 times 2 or 62 on BEC. Then you'll have task-based simulations, 4 of them, where the other audit, FAR, and reg have 8. and 3 essays called written communication, which is 15% of your score. Now, years ago when I took the exam, we had long problems in cost and managerial budgeting, joint product costing, and so on. Then they took it away for many years, then they brought it back. That's where that 35% in BEC, those are written communication types of questions. So those are the kinds of questions you're going to have. Now, what do you need to pass the exam? A 75 and above. Now, when I say a 75, if you think of college, if you got a 75 in college, what does that feel like? Like, you're not doing that well, you may not ever get a job, you're going to live with your parents till you die, right? But that's the C, like a C, right? 75 is a C. That's what C in CPA stands for, average. All right? I don't mean when you go meet a partner, you go, oh, you're a partner, CPA, you must be average. No. What it means is you need a little bit about a lot of information. This exam is like an inch deep, like a lake, an inch deep and a mile wide. But in a minute and a quarter in a multiple choice question, you've got to jump in your brain, leases, pensions, bonds, deferred taxes, and so on. That's where the repetition of upfront preparation is so important in order to get you ready to pass this thing called a CPA exam. So 75 and above, you pass, 74 and below, you fail. And it's kind of a bell-shaped curve where most of the scores are right about 74, 75, 76. That's how they are. A few down here at 20, a couple up here at 95. Because if you get 4 95s or above, and we have many students that do this, they get an award called the Elijah Watt Sells Award, which is great, right? And that's wonderful. You can tell everyone. And most people don't need 4 95s. They just want to join the 300 club. What's that? 75, 75, 75, 75. Why? Because they figure, I just want to get through it and be a CPA. You know, once you get your certificate, you stick it on your wall. I've got mine on my wall. It doesn't say your score. It just says either you are or you aren't a CPA. That's all. It's like being pregnant. Either you are or you aren't. You're not just a little bit, right? So, as far as the exam time strategies, we talk about how much time should it take. And the reason for this is there's 5 testlets on the exam. Testlet 1 is a multiple choice. Testlet 2 is multiple choice. Testlet 3 would be 2 task-based simulations. Testlets 4 and 5 for audit, FAR, and reg would be 3 and 3 more, 6 problems, and then these 2 is 8. For BEC, multiple choice, task-based Testlet 1, Testlet 2, multiple choice. Testlet 3 would be also 2 task-based simulations, then you get a break. Then Testlet 4 would be 2 more, because there's 4 total, and then the last one is your essays, written communication. So we want to cover in class how much time, and we'll set up a study schedule, a study planner, but how much time you need at the actual exam, because you don't want to get through the first 4 testlets and run out of time. You're never going to pass the exam. So what we need to do is work on good time management. And each exam has different number of questions, but basically you've got, let's just say, anywhere from 31 multiple choice in each testlet, that's 62 for BEC, up to 38 times 2 is 76 multiple choice in reg. So you'll see that you've got about a minute and a quarter per multiple choice. So that means I've got to kind of keep going and keep pushing myself in order to keep on the proper time strategy. Now, as far as the timing, you'll have first testlet. When you're done with the first testlet, it'll say, hey, do you want to take a break? No, you don't. Because if you take a break, the clock keeps running. Then you go out, go to the bathroom, do whatever, but then you got to wait in line to get back in, get re-fingerprinted to sit down and continue the exam. So after testlet 1, no break. Testlet 2, no break. Testlet 3, that's after that when you want to take a break. Because one of the cool things now is they give you an automatic free 15-minute break. Wow, right? When I was your age, did we get a break? I don't think so. They just said, here's your exam, 19 and a half hours over 3 days. Here's a paper pencil exam. Here's, we were so tough, they didn't even give us pencils. We wrote with blood. All right, that's how tough we were. Today, they give you a computer, they give you a calculator, they give you a break. Oh, you need a little break. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so you want to take that 15-minute break, but don't go over 15 minutes. Otherwise, the clock automatically starts running. Again, you've only got the 4 hours. So testlet 1, it'll ask you for a break. No. Testlet 2, do you want a break? No. Testlet 3, do you want a break afterwards? Yes, that's your free break. 15 minutes, come back in, then testlet 4, testlet 5. So that's kind of the way that it's structured. That's the way that it's flowing. And we talk here about, as you sit down, you'll get like a little yellow or whiteboard. They used to give you paper, but people would write notes and steal it. So now they give you like a hard board where you can write on it, turn it over, write on it. That's your scratch board. When you need a new one, raise your hand, raise the board. They'll come and give you as many as you need. But I always tell students to write down on there the time you expect to finish each part. So in other words, if I'm writing there and let's say I need 45 minutes, so it's 4 hours. So by the time the clock says 3 hours and 15 minutes, I should be done with the first 45 minutes of multiple choice. And so on. So you want to jot those times down so that way you don't run out of time. Because we figure, you need about an hour for the 3 task-based simulations. So the last 2 hours would be again with 2 hours left and then 1 hour left and then you go to 0. So you want to jot those down. But our timing, our suggested timing is that multiple choice are about 75 to 84 seconds each. Task-based simulations, there's some easier ones where you click and it opens a window, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20. The more complex, like the DRS, probably more like 25 minutes each. Research is about 10 minutes, and figure written communication, which is on BEC, about 15 minutes each. So that's kind of the way that it's structured. That's the way that it's organized. Again, we want to make sure you have enough time to get through all 4 parts timely. Now, what's new for the 2020 exam? There's been significant changes, especially in the FAR portion of the exam. First off, we talk about something called credit losses. And the credit loss used to be for receivables, what we call bad debt expense. But these changes are now called credit losses, and these changes are pretty pervasive and complicated, and it gives us more of what we call these bright line rules that accountants are used to. So in other words, they're used to using these, and it requires a little bit more judgment. So they're using more judgment, they're using more data analytics in order to develop these expectations for the credit loss. So what it says, for example, and we call it the CECL, current expected credit loss. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and estimate and say, okay, instead of looking back historically, we're going to either look back, current, or future, because we're looking at supportable future forecasts based on the predictive data analytics. We're looking ahead. What they're trying to say is, instead of just, as we're writing it off, we're going to look at what do we expect over the lifetime of this receivable, how much are we going to get? So over the lifetime, we're looking for more credit risk transparency. Because back in 2007, 2008, when we had the financial crisis, what happened is all these companies had a lot of bad debt expense, allowance for doubtful accounts on their balance sheet, but it wasn't enough to cover the changes because some of these receivables were getting worse and worse and worse. So that's why we had this big issue, and the government had to bail out all these companies, all these banks. So because of that, they came up with these new changes, and those are some of the credit loss expense. Also, some of the credit loss, what we're going to look at is areas for investments, for held to maturity, debt securities, and available for sale type debt securities. We're going to have to analyze those as well to look for the credit loss. So when expected credit losses increase, we're going to have an allowance for credit loss, and that's a contra account. And then we're going to have credit loss expense, so debit credit loss expense, credit allowance for credit loss. So we're going to have those and then make adjustments as it decreases, as it increases. If it increases, increase the amount. If it decreases, we're going to reverse out some of that allowance account. So those are some of the things that we'll cover in the receivables, in the investment areas, and anywhere else where we have this estimated credit loss. Another area of change was goodwill, which actually kind of made it easier. It deals with goodwill impairment testing. Basically what they did is they eliminated the second step. So the second step in goodwill impairment testing, which was calculating the implied fair value of goodwill, has been eliminated. So it basically makes the process much easier. So now you just basically compare the fair value of the reporting unit with its carrying value. And if the fair value is less than the carrying value, goodwill has been impaired. A loss should be recognized. We're going to write down goodwill. So it makes it a little bit easier. Other changes for 2020 for intangibles, it aligns the accounting treatment of implementation costs that are incurred when we talk about cloud computing arrangements, and it's treated as a service cost with the requirements to capitalize the implementation costs that are incurred, and this would be with respect to internal use software, so software that you're creating to use internally within the company. We have something called, which is kind of a tricky area, VIE, variable interest entities, but it expands the PCC, the private company accounting alternative for variable interest entities, to provide an election not to apply the regular VIE GAAP guidance when certain criteria is met. So that criteria is met, then you can elect not to do that. For GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB 87 provides a single model for lease accounting. So for example, it says all leases are essentially a finance lease with limited exceptions. So we talk in GAAP about finance leases and operating leases. Here it says they're pretty much all finance with limited exceptions. 89 provides clarification on the accounting for interest cost incurred before the end of a construction period. So if we're looking at a construction process, that would be one of the changes as well. So those are some of the updates that we will cover in the material, and that starts showing up as of January 1st, 2020. The next thing is the ethics exam. And this is an exam, hopefully, it's funny because I remember when I took the ethics exam, I always joke it's one of the few exams they all seem to cheat on. Oh gee, how ethical. But basically it's a take-home exam and you need to get like a 90% or above, or 87% or something like that. And it's multiple choice questions, it's self-study, the book's about as thick as our book. I mean, you can do it online, you can search, and you can retake it if you need to. You can take it, I believe, before you pass the exam, but it's an exam that you need to take in order to get your CPA certificate as well. Then we talk about work experience. So we had the educational to sit, and then what do you need to get certified? Generally, you need to submit a certificate of experience to show that you need about a year, which is about 2,000 hours of accounting experience. And that is generally under the supervision of a licensed active CPA. That means that they're keeping their CPE, continuing professional education, up to date. So that would be a licensed active CPA. You can do this before, during, or after. So if while you're in college, you worked for a CPA, they can sign off on your certificate of experience for the hours that you work. So maybe I worked for 6 months while I was in school and then I got another job when I graduated. You can have more than one certificate of experience. The total has to be at least a year. Now, how did this change back in my day when I was your age? What happened is we only needed a degree, an undergraduate degree of 120 units, but we needed 2 years of work experience. Now you need not 120, but 150, and in some states, just 120 to sit, 150 to get certified. Some states, 150 to sit or a master's degree. But you only need 1 year of work experience. Now, I suggest staying at least 2 to 3 years because you want to supervise, you want a senior a job rather, and it's great experience. So no matter what, even though after a year you get your CPA, you want to stay longer because that's really where you get a lot of experience. But again, remembering you can do before, during, or after. And then after all that is done, then submit your paperwork, become a CPA, stick it on your wall, and carry it with you forever, right? I'm Roger Philipp, CPA, CGMA. I'm so proud of it, I'm going to put it on my tombstone. When I die, it's going to say, here lies Roger Philipp, CPA. Fully depreciated, right? Because there ain't nothing left. All right, now, thank you so much for all of this information as far as you listening to it and absorbing it. Again, I want to thank you for your time, for your energy. Hopefully you're as excited about this exam as I am. As you can tell, I'm passionate and motivated about it. I want you to contact us and stay connected with us on social media. If you ever have any questions about the exam itself, career opportunities, and so forth, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, thank you very much for your time and have a great career in accounting.